Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar discussing about NebulaFlex and the security features within it. I must apologise today, I do have a bit of a cold, so if I do go a little bit quiet, I will come back. We are also joined by the UK and Ireland Sales Manager, Steve Bailey. If you would like to introduce yourself, Steve.
Afternoon, one and all. Thank you for joining one of our latest webinars. Hopefully you'll get some key takeaways from this. I will be monitoring the chat and also the questions as well. If there's any questions I can't answer during the webinar, there is going to be Q&A at the end. And Danny, with his more knowledge and experience, will hopefully answer those, or we can always take them as takeaway points.
Thank you ever so much, Steve. Right, so as discussed today, we are going to be going a little bit of an overview as to the benefits of what Nebula can offer yourselves and your customers, and then we'll be having a look at the NebulaFlex side of things, as well as some of the security facilities that are available within Nebula. So one of the biggest things that people come across in this day and age is implementing IT technology into their industry is the amount of man hours and the amount of investment in the infrastructure it actually takes. So you will always start off by purchasing the equipment, installing the equipment, and as you can see, this all takes time and money, as well as setting up monitoring for the equipment using SNMP and ICMP and like a syslog server. Access to the equipment, so whether or not you would need to set up a VPN, whether or not you would need to set up specific NAT rules, sometimes can leave you also quite vulnerable as well if set up incorrectly. Monitoring platforms such as some paid ones like SolarWinds or open source ones like Zabbix. Data storage, so you would have to implement some sort of NAS unit or a server with multiple hard drives in it to then contain all this information. And then once it's all actually up and running, you've got the complex updates and settings changes. So the bigger the network, the harder it is to manage, the more time consuming it is. As you can see, the man hours massively increases, as does the amount of expenditure that you need to spend on, obviously, sorting all of this out. User and device management, so setting up authentication by radius and managing sort of guest users and things like that within the infrastructure. So one of the biggest benefits that Nebula does provide you is the simplified and cost reduction in this as well. So you're never going to get away from not being able to purchase the equipment unless you've got some sort of leasing agreement in place. But again, that is always going to have a cost implication. Installation of the equipment becomes very streamlined, opposed to taking days, possibly weeks to implement an infrastructure. It can be up and running in sort of 5 to 10 minutes. Spend a little bit of time in the background before you get the equipment, but then when you actually get it, you can implement it in a very quick turnaround. No need for any sort of monitoring equipment, because Nebula does have its own monitoring platform built into it. So that's one less thing that you have to worry about, one less thing that you have to implement. Access to the equipment, it's all accessed through the Nebula Control Centre, which is housed on our AWS platform, which is very secure, very easy to access, and doesn't require any sort of complex routing VPNs in order to access it. So the monitoring platforms, because it's all under one unified platform, it is all available, so you can monitor your switches, your firewalls, so like your security devices, as well as all your wireless devices as well. No need for data storage. If you go for the professional pack, you will get up to 365 days of reporting. On the free version, you do get 7 days rolling on that as well. So again, you don't have to spend that money on storage, as well as maintaining that storage, making sure it's always up and running. The updates and settings changes are all done within Nebula Control Centre. You can automate firmware upgrades to be done at certain times of the day, certain devices at specific days. So for instance, you can update your access points, then another day maybe your switches, and then once all of them are done and completed, you can then look at then upgrading your firewalls. So user and device management, you can add multiple users within it, so administration users. You can even, if you're dealing with a Zyzel team for whatever reason, you can also add them as an administrator to help you with complex settings or any potential issues you may come across. And that really just shows you how much it actually does cut down the amount of man hours and the investment in the infrastructure that you actually need to do. So it's very cost effective, very easy to manage for both yourselves and all your clients. So we're going to go on to talk about NebulaFlex. Now, what NebulaFlex is, it is a firmware upgrade for specific devices which was once not available to be on Nebula, but now, as we're moving forward, more and more devices are being added, giving you that flexibility with your traditional network equipment. So you've got two sides of this. You've got the NebulaFlex, which is a dual mode functionality. This is specific access points which can be either managed in a standalone environment. Once you've upgraded the actual access point, you will be able to onboard that to the Nebula Control Centre and manage it all from a centralized location. NebulaFlex Pro is more aimed towards the access points which currently can be controlled by our USG range or the NXC controllers. By upgrading the firmware, you will be able to do away with the NXC and actually move it directly onto the Nebula Control Centre, giving you that flexibility of being able to manage it from one centralized platform. So they do have a triple mode function, so you can always roll it back to the control if you're not happy with how the Nebula works. Some of the technology that we've got designed, for instance, smart antenna and Wi-Fi health actually does give you that granular detail of how it is actually performing. In regards to, it can be quite difficult to manage and gain access to it if it's a sort of standalone mode or if it's in a controller environment. And also part of this, we will offer you project support for all of our partners as well. So if you're not joined on our partner program, feel free to reach out to me and I will be able to get you enrolled on the partner program and then introduce you to some of our approved distributors. So it is very simple to set up. It is a case of just logging onto nebula.zyzel.com using any form of web browser. Make sure the access points are on the latest firmware, which you can download free from zyzel.com. Register the device and enable it in either the Nebula Control Centre on a web browser, or you could even do it using our Nebula app. If you're not happy with how Nebula works and you prefer it in a standalone mode or in a controller environment, then it is just a case of unregistering your NebulaFlex device. It will automatically reset itself back to a factory default, in which case you will need to log back into it or log into the controller to then readopt it and set it back up again. If it is in a controller environment, it will obviously download its config again from the controller and it'll be functioning as it did prior to you putting it onto Nebula. So currently NebulaFlex is available on a few selected models of switches and wireless access points. If, for instance, you do have an access point which was purchased prior to it being NebulaFlex enabled, it is just a case of downloading the latest firmware, bringing it onto the latest, and then onboarding it onto the Nebula platform, which means that even if you have bought one and you do want to try it out, there's nothing stopping you from trying that out. Nebula is free, or it does have a free aspect of it, which does contain a lot of the standard functions that you do need. We will be covering the sort of licensing a little bit later on in this webinar. So one of the good things about Nebula is being able to manage multiple sites all under sort of one HUD. So if, for instance, you're an IT company who deal with a lot of different clients, you would have like an organization level that you would sit under. And then underneath there, you would have multiple sites, which in essence would be your customers. What you can do is you can create configuration templates to make deployment a lot easier. So rather than spending weeks deploying a specific site, which might have been set up in a similar sort of environment in the past, you would just create a configuration template and roll that straight out, meaning that you can actually get a site up and running and configured in a matter of minutes. And the same with some of the switches as well. You can actually clone the settings. So if you are implementing a customer with multiple sites that are all set up in the same sort of fashion, rather than having to go through and set it up manually, going through each of the tabs, each of the screens, you can just clone the settings, and as soon as you onboard the switch onto Nebula, it will automatically download its configuration. And like anything, it's always good to be able to back up and restore, so that if you're, for instance, making some complex changes and you're concerned that it might cause issues with your clients and unnecessary downtime, you can always back this up, so that if you do cause any specific issues, rolling it back in a matter of minutes to reduce the amount of downtime for your clients is a very good feature, and it's only recently been implemented and brought into the Nebula platform. So like anything, it's always good to be able to have that additional bit of control. So on the switches and on the access points, you do have sort of bandwidth management on there as well. So if you think of it in a multi-tenancy building, so you've got one building with multiple offices, all managed by a single IT company, you can restrict and control the bandwidth on each specific port of the switch or on a particular SSID. This just gives you that bit more of a control of that, so that if, for instance, they have like an 100 meg line and they've got 10 customers in it, you'll want to restrict that, making sure that somebody in one of the offices isn't using too much, and then everybody else is suffering, and then that's where complaints would be generated. So going over to some of our switches that's supported in our Nebula platform, you've got two ranges at the moment that are currently supported. You've got the GS1920 version 2 and the XGS1930. So the GS1920 version 2, you can get these in an 8, 24 and 48 port. You can get all of these on PoE as well, with the largest PoE budget being 375 watts. They do support protocols such as spanning tree protocol, a rapid spanning tree, as well as LACP as well, which is link aggregation, which basically improves your resilience in your network and does allow you to sort of push more bandwidth through additional ports. So you could team them up as such and get like 2 gig out of it as well. Now the XGS 1930, this is a 10 gig uplink switch. So it does contain 4 10 gig uplink ports, which again can be link aggregated. So you can actually pull out about 40 gig through them ports if set up correctly. Now these are only available in the 20, 28 and the 52 ports. Both of them are PoE enabled as well as the non-PoE as well. So if we just break that down a little bit more and show you the individual switches themselves. So again, the 1928 HP version 2, this will come with 10 ports. 8 of them are gigabit PoEs and 2 of them are gigabit combo ports. So a combo port is basically a port which shares the same MAC address. So the 2 ports will share the same MAC address, and you can actually use these in a sort of configuration. And I mean, I use this at home at the moment, and I use them as my downlink ports as well. The PoE budget on that is 130 watts, and it is also fanless as well. So in a small office environment, it would be very good if you haven't got a cabinet, a comms cabinet as such. A fanless one would be quite good because it means that it doesn't generate much noise, which can be a bit of a nuisance to employees and colleagues. And it does support the high power PoE as well, so the 802.3 AT standard. The 24 HP, that has 28 ports. 24 of them are gigabit PoE, and then you also get 4 gigabit combo ports on that one as well. You can see that the PoE budget on that is a lot higher at 375 watts. So when it comes to powering access points or phones, if you do have a lot of them, then you want to be looking for the sort of the bigger end switch on there as well. Unfortunately, due to the size of it, this one isn't fanless, so it's not really recommended to install it in a small office environment where it's going to be sat on a desk. It would want to be primarily in a comms cabinet. The 48 port, that again with a PoE budget of 375 watts, also is not fanless, and that comes with 44 gigabit Ethernet ports, 4 gigabit combo ports, as well as 2 SFP slots as well. So you can put a gig fiber link into that. Just bear in mind that if you do get that, you do want to be getting the modules as well for that. Right, so the two switches which we have available on the XGS 1930 range is the 28 and the 52 HP. Again, we do have the non-PoE ones, but for this demonstration, I am going to just go over the sort of PoE switches at the moment. So the 28 one has a full count of 28 ports, 24 gigabit PoEs, and it has 4 gigabit SFP plus slots. So that is a 10 gig fiber switch, which has 4 of them. And again, if you are looking to implement them, you do need to make sure you get the correct modules as well, which any of the sales team will be able to point you in the right direction and provide you the part codes for them. Again, the PoE budget is 375 watts. Again, due to the size of it and the power requirements or the PoE budget, this is also not fanless, and it still supports the 802.3 AT protocol. So the 52 HP, it's got a full port count of 52 ports, 48 of them are gigabit Ethernet PoE, and it does have 4 gigabit SFP plus slots as well. So when it comes to big offices that might have a lot of servers on site and a lot of data transfer, this is where you would really want to implement a 10 gig switch, just because it's going to have that extra demand on your network traffic. So PoE budget, fanless, and the high power again is the same as the 28 HP. So these are the current switches which do support NebulaFlex. I am hoping that they do implement a lot more switches into the portfolio range. I have heard that they are looking at trying to migrate about 80% of our product portfolio into Nebula, because it is the new upcoming trend, because it just makes management of the traditional networks a lot easier. So that's it for the switches on the NebulaFlex side. So we're going to be going through the access points now. So here is a list of our current supported access points within Nebula. So again, if they're not on the latest firmware and they're not NebulaFlex enabled currently, it is just a case of downloading it from our website and upgrading it. So you've got the NWA 1123 AC V2. So we do have the V1, which was its predecessor. So the V2 is NebulaFlex enabled straight out of the box, which has a 2x2 spatial stream. And it's got an internal SU MIMO antenna, and it does allow for 128 associations. It is important to mention that the associations is how many devices can physically be associated to that access point. It doesn't necessarily mean that you want 128 devices connected to that access point, because you'll start hitting congestion on its cable interface. So realistically speaking, you would want to put more access points in to spread the load and to increase the user experience in this scenario. So the NWA 1123 AC Pro, this is a 3x3 access point with a speed of 1.7 gigabits per second. This has also got an internal optimized SU MIMO antenna. Now the optimized part of the antenna allows you to actually mount it onto a wall. If you put certain access points onto a wall which don't have an optimized antenna, the radio pattern in which it broadcasts can actually hinder your experience and cause a lot of interference with sort of like the floors above you, the floors below you, as well as reducing the amount of coverage on the floor that it's actually installed on. So it is important when you are implementing access points that you do mount them in the correct area in order to get the best performance. And as you can see, the association count on this is also 256 as well. So as you work up the product portfolio, your association do increase, and the specification and the reliability of it also increases as well. So the 1123 AC HD is our 3x3 antenna. So you've got 2x2 and a 3x3 spatial streams with a 1.6 gigabit per second speed, and this has an internal static MIMO antenna. So as I was going back to the optimized antenna, this one you would want to house on a ceiling rather than on a wall for implementation, and this is one of our Wave 2 access points as well. So the NWA 1302 AC, this is a 2x2 access point, and one of the things that I like about this is that it's quite slick design. It's favored more for hospitality areas in which you can install it in a room, and with its dynamic smart antenna, it increases the user experience because of how the dynamic smart antenna works. It actually maintains a higher modulation despite if you've got a poor signal. So rather than being at the end of the spatial stream and pulling other connections down, this will actually maintain a good distance, a good modulation, and in hindsight will actually give the users a lot better experience when it comes to wireless. It is a bit of a smaller unit, so if you're looking for real high contention with a lot of clients, then you want to be looking more for a bigger range as well, which is coming on our next slide now. So the NWA 5123 AC HD, this is a 3x3 spatial stream with an internal MIMO antenna. This is actually one I use at home at the moment, and I actually took out one of our competitors' one, which I was using as a trial benefit for a couple of years. And by installing this, I actually improved my coverage by about 5 times, and I can actually reach it to the end of both of my gardens as well, and maintains a real high speed. I've got to admit, the kids do like it when they're sat outside on the phones, watching YouTube and whatever they do nowadays with the TikTok. Now, this WAC 6303DS, this is the biggest sort of unit which contains a smart antenna. So if you're looking for the best user experience in high contention areas such as conference halls, where there's going to be a lot of people logging onto the Wi-Fi, potentially hindering everyone else's experience, this is where you would want to implement this. So the spatial streams is 3x3, so you've got a 2x2 and a 3x3 radio within it, and speeds of 1.65 gigabits per second. And again, this is a Wave 2 access point with an association count of 256 devices. So this is a list of all our access points which currently support NebulaFlex. As I say, the 1123s, so the AC-V2, the AC Pro and the AC-HD, 1302, the 5123 AC-HD and the 6303DS. Now, coming at the end of June, so probably available in July, the following ones, which I'm looking forward to because there are some smart antennas in there and some of our external graded ones as well. So to give you that more flexibility. And as you can see, the NCC Pro Pack, which is the Pro Pack for the Nebula Control Centre, the 5123 AC HD does come with a 3-year. It comes with a 1 year and then a promo of an extra 2 years currently, as does the 6303 DS. The ones which are coming in June, by default, will give you a 1-year Pro Pack with them as well. Some of them do support the Wi-Fi health support as well, which we will be going through a bit more detail on our next webinar, which is focusing around wireless devices. And if you'd like any more information on any of these particular products, then feel free to send me an email. I can share my details with you after the webinar. and I'm more than happy to give you a call and to discuss any potential projects you might have for our wireless devices and discuss the benefits on using them as well. So that covers our NebulaFlex aspect of the webinar, and now we're going to be looking into the security side of things. So this will involve you having to take out the security pack with our devices, so specifically the gateways, and I'm just going to show you some of the features that are available. So in order for you to be able to use these security features, you will need the NSG50, the NSG100 or the NSG200, as well as the NSG300. So one of them, depending on your requirements, you'll have to pick a specific one. One of the important things to remember is when you're speccing out a firewall is to understand your customer's requirements. So what sort of throughput are they going to require at their building? If, for instance, they've got a 50 meg line and they want all the antivirus and all the UTM functions enabled, then the USG50 will be able to cope with that fine. As you can see down here, where it says UTM throughput, 50 meg, that means once all the UTM functions, such as the antivirus, the IDP, the application intelligence, when that's enabled, it does mean that the performance will be hindered to only 50 meg. Whereas if you don't require that, then it will do about 300 meg with just the simple firewall inspection. So the NSG50 comes with a 1 WAN port, so that's either an SFP or a gigabit Ethernet port, and that comes with 4 LAN ports as well. The NSG100, this does come with 2 WAN ports, so if you do have 2 internet connections and you want a bit of failover, a bit of resilience in your network, then you want to be going for the NSG100. It is good to know that the UTM throughput on this is only 90 meg. So if you do like have a 100 meg lease line, then you really want to be going for the next model up, which would be the 200. And as you can see with the 200, it does contain, again, 2 WAN ports. It contains 5 LAN ports, and it will allow you a UTM throughput of 300 meg. So again, if you're looking for anything, a broadband requirement of 100 to 300 meg, then the NSG200 is where you're going to want to go. If, however, on any of these units you are just looking for VPN setup, then the VPN throughput does also increase. So on the NSG200, you can get up to 500 meg, on the 50, 100 meg, and on the 100, 150 meg. So one of the newest products to come into the Nebula range is the NSG300. So this is the biggest unit we do for the NSGs and the Nebula gateways. This gives you a UTM throughput of about 450 meg with a firewall inspection throughput of about 4 gig. So again, it all based on what your client's requirements are in terms of their throughput, determines which unit you are going to actually want to use, as well as the features they want enabling. It does allow you a VPN throughput of 750 meg as well. So just to go on, one of our newest features that's come out is the Nebula Health. So on the dashboard, it does give you an overall count of how many devices you've got online, so how many access points, how many switches, how many gateways, and it also shows you how overloaded they are. So if they start reaching sort of 80–90%, you know that you're going to have to start looking to upgrade it because it's not going to cut it for much longer. It does show you how many clients you've got online wirelessly, as well as also the PoE draw as well. So over all the switches that you've got, it will continuously increase, so it will tell you how much PoE is being consumed over all of your switches. One of the good things I like about the NebulaFlex switches as well, the GS1920 and the XGS1930, is it does have a little indicator on the front of the switch which shows you how much PoE you're using. So you don't even need to log into this console to figure it out. You can literally look on the front of it and think, I need to get another switch. I'm starting to hit my PoE budget. So it also shows you what your WAN throughput is for your multiple WAN ports. So WAN 1 and WAN 2, you can flick between them both. And it also shows you the top applications that are being used. So it'll show you what specific applications is using what amount of data over a sort of day period on this view. And then it'll show you underneath it what clients have been using that. And if you have a look at the top there, that's where you can see the organizational view and the site view. So again, you can have your company being the organization. Underneath that, you can then have your customer sites individually if they've only got one site, or you can do it at a different level and have your customer as the organization and then have each of their remote sites listed as an individual site and just manage them all from a centralized platform. Right, so now we're just going to go overview some of the security features. So the antivirus, the content filtering, the application intelligence, the intrusion detection and prevention, and the Nebula security services analysis tools. So this is something I use quite a lot at home to sort of know what the kids and the missus have been sort of going on, how much internet they use of mine. So as you can see, you can by default it'll show you the last 7 days of application usage. So you can see a nice friendly graph, a little pie chart showing you what application is using what data on there, and then underneath that it does break it down, so it will show you sort of like the top 10 applications with the usage and the specific category that they are in. It just helps you really have that visibility of what's being used. One of the things that I keep getting asked recently is when it comes to offices in a centralized building, so like a managed office environment, they're wanting to monitor the amount of traffic that they use. Sometimes it's because of a bit of a political aspect as to they're using more data than what they should be, or they just want to be able to control and see how much they're using because they might look at getting their own line in the future. So this is something that can really assist them as well, especially with the reporting facilities it does provide you, which I will go over in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. So that was the application on the previous slide. So this is looking at the sort of content filtering side. So if you do set it up, it will show you any particular hits, people that have been trying to go on sites which you've specifically blocked within your industry. So in a school environment, for instance, content filtering will be used to restrict access to gambling sites, to YouTube potentially, Facebook, social media, anything like that, and then you can physically see who's how many times people have tried going on that, and then you can obviously bring that up with the school themselves just to enforce a stricter policy there. So the antivirus as well. So if you've had any sort of particular viruses which have been trying to hit your device, it will show you this on here. It will show you where it came from, so the IPv4 address, how many times it's tried hitting you, and what sort of the hit percentage is as well. Again, you can roll this back. If you're on the pro version, you can roll this back to 365 days rolling. And one of the good features about all these three sections as well, you can actually set up scheduled email reports, or you can send one out as and when you require. So just to give you a bit of an example of what that report looks like, this here is an application report. So this shows you what specific applications have been used. So at the top level, it'll give you a breakdown. It'll say Microsoft, Google, Skype. This is usage in terms of data being used, and this is usage based on percentage. And then what it actually does is underneath it, it breaks down each of these individual sections and provides you with the client IP address. So you'll know who was going to that at what sort of time, as well as knowing what sort of usage they've been doing on there as well. So the report itself is very clean and tidy and is very sought after by IT managers, head teachers in the schools, or potentially the landlords of a building if it is a managed building. So one of the good things about Nebula, and I was actually pleasantly surprised about how easy it is to set up, is being able to set up a VPN, so an L2TP over IPsec client. For any that don't know, this is basically setting up your NSG as a VPN server, and then a VPN client would be like your laptop, your phone, your PC, or something like that, in order for you to access like localized resources. So if you've got a file server on site and you've got remote users that need to access it, you can literally get this up and running in about 10 minutes, and it just works as it should do. And the latency is very low as well, so the sort of data compression as well is very, very good. So there's very little to do with it. First off, you need to obviously create a user account. So using our cloud authentication within Nebula, you can just set up a user. You can have them log in by either a username or an email. And as you can see on the screen there, it just gives you an indication of what the sort of screen looks like and the information that's available on there. So once you've set up a user, you go down to the L2 TP over IPsec client and then fill in them details there. And that's pretty much all there is to it. You log into your PC, you create one with putting the pre-share key, which is listed on that page there, and then the user details that you set up, and that is it. It just worked. As I say, I did it in like less than 10 minutes, and I was pleasantly surprised knowing how difficult VPNs can be to set up with certain vendors as well, how easy this actually was. So for any typical home user, any non-technical person, I believe could probably do this in a matter of minutes or so. It does also support site-to-site VPN as well. I don't have any examples on this at the moment, but if it is something that you're interested in, then we can always contact you out offline and just sort of go through this. So one of the screens that's pretty good if you do have a lot of VPNs is it's showing you who's connected to the VPN. As you can see, that was me after I set it up and tested it. It's just showing me my public-facing IP address as well as my assigned IP address, which I've provided for my VPN users. So that really consists of everything for the security side of things at the moment. Just to go through sort of the licensing side of Nebula now. So you do have the free version, which gives you a lot of features which most of the times you will be quite happy with. When it comes to businesses, schools, or managed services, managed service buildings, then the professional pack itself would be where you want to be looking, because it will automatically build a visual network topology, which is very handy for knowing what access point is plugged into what switch and what switch is plugged into what gateway. It does provide you the 365-day reporting as well, and the client monitoring, which is very handy, especially for the reporting purposes to the MDs, the technical directors, the head teachers. It does also, or it will also support very soon in the future, dynamic VLANing as well, which is going to be very good. And the Wi-Fi health reporting as well is also going to be implemented very soon. I think that's coming into June as well. And if you are looking to roll this out to multiple clients with a site config clone and the templates and things like that, then the Pro Pack is what you're going to want to use for that. And as I say, it just streamlines the amount of time it takes to actually implement all of this. The advanced support as well, which is also built within it. You can, any issues or any queries you may have, you can directly access the support ticket portal and automatically just send out a ticket as soon as you need to within the actual portal, keeping everything under that one interface. The security pack is what you'll require if you need the app patrol, the IDP, the antivirus, the content filtering, or the secure reporting. So as I showed you on a few slides towards the end, the reporting side, the email reports, the scheduling of the reporting, you'll want the security pack for that, because that's what it uses to generate that information. It's also worth mentioning that you don't have to go for the professional pack or the security pack. Nebula is free for a lot of services. If, for instance, there are features that you want in the security pack, but you're not really bothered about the professional pack, then you don't actually have to get all of them. You can just mix and match. So you can go Nebula with the security pack, Nebula with a professional pack, or Nebula with a professional pack and the security pack. It's entirely up to you. Nebula is a product that is built around our customers and is very flexible. I'm always keen on finding feedback as well. If you do use it, I am keen on getting feedback and generating it back to the research and development department to help evolve our product around your needs and requirements as well. So for the moment, that is all I have for you today regarding NebulaFlex and the security aspects. I do hope you found it interesting and knowledgeable. And yeah, we do have a Q&A section, so if you've got any questions, please feel free to fire them across. So I can see Damien's commented, the new APs that have come in Nebula June, move from their current NXE 2,500 setups. So if you mean that you've got some of the access points which was listed and coming out in June connected to an NXE 2500, then yes, all you would need to do is upgrade them to the latest firmware, register them with the Nebula Control Centre, and then you will be able to onboard them onto Nebula and manage them there opposed to the NXE. But again, you can always put them back to the NXE if you find that you aren't that you don't like them in the Nebula platform. Damien's also mentioned about the SSL VPN for the clients. At the moment, I'm not aware of SSL VPN being available for Nebula, but it is something I could take to R&D because it is not the first time that has actually been mentioned. Phil, is there a limit on how many devices can be hosted under the free Nebula option? I'm not aware of any limitations on the amount of devices that you can manage on Nebula. It's all based on the features that you require. So if you want the features for the professional side of things, then you're going to need that. But other than that, there's no restriction on the actual the amount of devices you have. So A, B, C, D, E, F, is there a difference between Nebula and NebulaFlex, or are those just the same things? So Nebula and NebulaFlex. So Nebula is cloud-only management. So the specific products can only be managed by Nebula. The difference is with NebulaFlex is it gives you that flexibility of managing it either locally or on a controller or on Nebula. So that's where the Flex comes from. It provides you that flexibility. Damien, just to confirm, I believe it is worth doing because I think managing the access points in Nebula is I wouldn't say better than the NXE controller because the NXE controller has a lot of other benefits as well, but it all depends on what you're actually using it for. But I would definitely recommend it because it just makes it easy for management, reporting purposes, and accessing as well. In regards to accessing, linking into the Office 365 for user accounts, I'm not aware of that, but I am going to take it up with R&D because it's not the first time I've been asked that one either. I know they've got a localized authentication and they do have a radius authentication for Nebula at the moment, which works absolutely fine. I do think they should be putting in an Active Directory integration, and with this day and age, people are going more over to the hosted Office 365, so I think they need to look at integrating into that for authentication as well. So ABCDEF have come back as ISIL writing their own IDS IPS rules, or they're using a third-party service. That I'm not actually too sure off the top of my head, but if you leave that with me and provide me your contact details, then I can find out an answer for that, and we can discuss that further offline. And by the looks of it, they are the end of my questions. So, I mean, if you do have any other questions, feel free to fire them across. Any news on the API? I haven't had any news as of yet, but I do know it is in the pipeline to allow you to API integration from other systems as well. But I believe you've got my email details, Damien. So if you want to drop me an email with any specific enhancements or requirements that you think need to be addressed in the Nebula side of things, I can speak to the relevant people within Zyzel and make sure that I get you a definitive answer in regards to that. So, well, that concludes our webinar for today. So I thank you all again for attending. I hope you found it interesting. And again, if you do need any information whatsoever from ourselves, just feel free to give our sales number a call. My name's Daniel, and I'll be more than happy to speak to you and discuss any potential projects you may have coming forward. So thanks again for your time. You have a good day. Enjoy the sunshine. Thank you.